For this project, I'm using just a little watercolor paper, and I've got my paint in this palette here. The kind of paint I'm using is Shinhan Pro watercolor. You can really use any kind of watercolor. This one comes in tubes, and then I put the tubes in my little palette. I'm going to use a round brush. It has a nice point to it, so I can get wider lines or skinnier lines. And I'm starting off by getting some water on my brush, and then I'm going with a light blue to make my clouds on the bottom. And I'm just going to draw in a little cloud shape with my light blue. And then while it's still wet, I'm just going to kind of drag some of that color into the middle of the cloud. This blue is kind of like a cerulean blue, so it's really nice and light and fun. And I'm not getting it too bright, too bold, because I want it to be kind of more subtle. I'll do the same thing on this side with this cloud. So I'm just dipping my brush in some water, adding a little bit of blue. The more water you have with the paint, the lighter the color, so I have it pretty watery. And then I'm just adding some water to kind of drag that color from the outside of the cloud into the middle with just some water. And anywhere that water goes, the paint will follow, so it'll just kind of all bleed together to fill in the cloud. I'm just kind of cleaning off the blue of my brush, and I'm going to go into some purple. If you don't have a purple watercolor, you can always mix purple with blue, and I actually use pink instead of red because it usually makes a nicer purple, but I have a purple in this set, so I'm just going to use that. And I'm starting on the inside with my purple because that would be my last color of the rainbow, so I'm kind of going to work backwards through my rainbow colors. And it's okay if it bleeds into the cloud a little bit, I don't really mind that, but if you don't want your rainbow to bleed in the cloud, you can just stop a little bit before, or you can wait for those clouds to be completely dry. After purple is blue, so I'm going to go ahead and use my brush to kind of drag some blue in a nice little arch above the purple. Now you can see in some areas I have a little space between my colors, and in some areas the colors are touching. And this again is a personal preference. If you want to leave some space between each color, you can, or if you want them all to touch, you can too. Now if my purple is still wet, they might bleed together. You can see it doing there at the end right there on the right side of my rainbow. And I don't mind if it bleeds together. The colors are close enough where if they mix, it's not a big deal, and it just kind of makes it more interesting to look at. Next on my list is green, so I'm working my way backwards through the colors of the rainbow, and I'm going to get some green on my brush and pull it around the top of my blue, and I'm allowing it to touch in places, and some places I'm leaving a little bit of white in between the colors. And again, if it mixes a little bit, that's okay. Kind of like it to blend and bleed just a little bit here and there. Kind of rinsing some of that green and moving on to my bright yellow. It's like a light lemon yellow. And I'm putting that above the green. I had to think for a minute, working backwards through the colors. And I'm keeping my colors fairly light. If you want your rainbow to be quite a bit brighter, you have two choices. You can either really try to layer the paint on with a little bit less water right away, or you can put your first coat on here and then you can add a brighter layer on top. So you could do a second coat of paint to kind of get your colors brighter. It's really up to you. I'm going to keep mine pretty light. I'm just doing one coat. I like to keep it kind of very watercolory. Now for my orange, I didn't have an orange paint, so I mixed some red with some like cadmium yellow. It's a warmer yellow or a more golden yellow. And then I'm going for more of a rosy, like a reddish pinkish color for my top color. I've got kind of a warm red and a cooler red. This red is more of a rosy red than the warm red. But again, that's up to you. And sometimes it's fun to put pink on top too. Just depends on what you're looking for. And again, I'm having it touch in some places, and in some places I'm leaving a little bit of white in between the colors, just for variety. So I could leave it like this, which is what I'm going to do, or if you wanted to, you could go back over the colors if you wanted to make them brighter and add another layer of color. So there's my first rainbow, just the basic rainbow from one cloud to another. You can play with the size of the clouds. You can make them bigger, smaller, the direction of the rainbow. Now for this one, I wanted to show you a little bit of a different design. I thought it'd be fun to put flowers in this one. This is more of like a decorative element, I guess. And so I'm starting off with my rosy red, and I'm just making some shapes that will turn into kind of a rose looking flower. So they don't have to be perfect circles. You can see they're kind of lumpy in places, which is fine. I'm just putting the color on lightly with some watercolor, and we'll kind of let it sit. I will be adding details to this one later. Next, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush so that I can kind of go in and get a little bit more detailed. So I'm going in with a darker kind of an olive green, and I want to draw my leaves in. Now I'm being very careful to not touch my flower with my leaves. You can see there's a tiny little white in between the two. That's because my flowers are still wet. So if I let them touch my leaf color, I will have red mixing with green. And because those two are complementary colors, that will give you a nice shade of brown. And I didn't want any brown in this picture, so I'm leaving just a tiny white line in between my flowers and my leaves to avoid the colors mixing. Now you could also wait until the flowers are dry and then use the green, and you wouldn't have that problem, but I didn't feel like waiting, so I'm just leaving that little space between the two. I like to add an odd number of leaves around my flowers. Odd numbers are, it's one of those like rules that kind of comes in handy in art. It's good to work in odd numbers. So I've got my 3 little leaves. I'm trying not to make them exactly the same. And then I want to make kind of a little stem here. I'm going to put a little bud on the end later. And I'm going to do 2 on this one so that I have 3 buds, again, kind of going for that odd number. And I think I will leave it like that for now. All right, I'm going to leave the flowers for now, and I want to add some lines for my rainbow. And this time I'm not going to use all of the rainbow colors. I'm just going to do a smaller, more simple rainbow. So I'm starting with orange. I want that to be in the middle. And I'm just curving it really nice and high. Almost looks like a little handle that goes from one flower to the next. And again, just like I did with my leaves, my orange is not touching my flowers. I'm leaving a tiny white space between the two. I'm trying to have a nice smooth line that goes from one side to the next. Now, because this is a more simplified picture, I'm going to play around with my colors here and not do every single color. So I did want kind of a red to kind of tie in with the red flowers. And this time I'm leaving a white space in between my colors. I do not want them to touch. So I'm trying to be pretty careful as I go around, leaving a little bit of white in between my red and my orange. And you can really play with colors. I could have put purple on the top or green. You can make it fit with whatever your decor is. It's fun to kind of break the rules a little bit and not do it exactly like a regular rainbow. And then I want to do another color. I think I'm going to use a light blue. And this time I'm going to try for a thinner line, just for kicks and giggles, to add some variety to my line shape. So I'm using my blue and I'm trying to use more of the tip of my brush, so I'm not quite pushing down as hard as I did last time. And I'm trying to get a nice blue line from one flower to the next. And you can see as I'm working, I'm getting these little beads of water, so I'm trying to smooth those out so I don't have the little beads of color like right in the middle of my rainbow. So get back down to the bottom. I don't mind if they're at the bottom. All right, I'm going to switch back to my other brush in just a minute. I was thinking about adding another color, changed my mind. Now I'm going back to my little brush and I want to add some details to my flowers. So I'm adding just some curved lines. And I'm kind of going in these little circles around the center of my flower. They get a little bit longer as I get towards the outside of the flower, and this kind of makes my flowers look more rose-like just by adding these darker lines. I'm using a little bit more paint and a little less water, so my lines are a little bit darker than what I originally put on there. I start kind of by making like a comma shaped line, and then I have larger and larger curves as I go around. And then I'm also going to go in with my green, same thing, a little bit more paint this time, a little bit less water. And I want to add some lines to my leaves just to give them a little bit more detail and definition. So I'm going around and doing that on all of my little leaves. This is kind of an olive green. And then I'm going to go in with like a red, maybe a little bit orangey red, and I want to add those little buds that I was telling you about before. So I'm just kind of adding a little bud shape to the end of those stems, just to add a little bit more color to my picture. And I could stop there, but I feel like it needs to fill out a little bit more. So I like to make kind of these stick-like shapes with a light green, and then add little dots on them to kind of look like a little sprig of something, maybe a little grassy-like plant, something to add a little bit of interesting texture to my picture. So I wanted my green to be lighter than my leaves, and I wanted to have a little more texture. So I'm using these skinny lines, and then I just add little dots to them, maybe little buds coming off of plants or something to give it a little bit more texture. I do this a lot when I am making floral wreaths as something to add texture there. You can look that up in my videos. I've got a couple where I do like words in the middle and then I add flowers and leaves around the outside. And this is one of my favorite things to add. And there you have it. Another kind of rainbow, this time with flowers. So hope you had fun with these. Thank you so much for watching, and please join me for more of my video tutorials.